Hello and welcome to Broadsword Wargaming. In this video, I'm going to show you how I built a trench-themed battle board that you could use for most of your wargaming systems. Hello and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, please do think about clicking that subscribe button for more videos to come, because this video is a first for me. It's a full board build from start to finish. I've been planning on doing one of these for absolutely ages. I'm going to run a kill team tournament at some point in the future. I've got a few boards and I'm always needing new ones for the channel. I built one or two on my own off camera. That were a little bit easier. I've got a nice sand board I did and a green board. I've done quite a lot of work with Luke from Gaming Scenic, or Luke's APS. And this is using a lot of techniques he showed me, and I wasn't sure if I'd be able to do it on my own, so I thought, sod it, let's give it a go. It wasn't originally going to be a trench board. The frame wasn't really set out to do this, but I thought I'll try it anyway and see what happens. So I'm going to show you all the materials I used. I'm going to run you through the process at each step to get this board to look how it does now. And at the very end, I'll tell you some of the things I probably could have or should have done differently to make it a little bit better or a little bit easier for next time. So I hope you guys enjoy it, and I'll catch you at the end.
To begin this build, I went round the studio and found everything I thought I might use. This is coffee stirrers, sandbags, different types of ground cover, ruined buildings, train tracks, crates, PVA, watered down PVA, super glue, anything that might be good. The baseboard itself is 3mm plywood, topped with 25mm polystyrene and edged with 25mm wood. If you want to see how to do this, I'm sure I can do another video on it at some point. But as we're doing a trench board, I thought I'd see how wide my trenches need to be. So I'm using coffee stirrers. I found about 100 of these, and I'm going to use them. I don't know if that's enough, but we'll find out. But I've figured out 2 inches is kind of the correct width for them and the correct height. Unfortunately, some old train tracks I had for a project I've not yet done, and I might do, were the perfect width and height for the model. So I may use these for the floors. We'll see how we go. But they actually turned out to be a great template to cut these trenches in. Having tried one trench diagonally across the board and straight across, I thought it looked a bit lonely and a bit boring. So I thought I'd go for like a split trench here on the board. So I just take a normal Stanley knife, cut pretty roughly around my template, and then get ready to pull it out with my fingers. This bit is really messy. These polystyrene balls get absolutely everywhere. If I wasn't recording this, and if you're doing this at home, I would advise doing this outside. Put something on the floor so you can catch as many beads as you can, and then done, because this took me ages to clean up afterwards. But as you can see, it's starting to take a bit of shape now, and I'm going to have to do something about these edges.
The main issue I had at this point was I had to put a wooden beading around the board that was inclusive of the kill team size.
Trying to think of something to do with these edges seemed quite apparent to maybe just put some polystyrene down and make it like it's the edge of a hillside or like a forest edge or some collapsed rocks, and this is the edge of the trench. So that's the theme I'm going for, and this has just come up naturally. I just needed to do something to cover them. I took any old blank bits of polystyrene, made it like a double tiered hill, and this gives the gameplay a bit more undulation and makes the board a bit more interesting. So just break it off, get it roughly to the shape you want, and covering just enough of the board. I have actually done a few rock faces before, and I'm going to use some rock molds. So you need to cut the polystyrene to a straight edge, and that way you can stick the rock molds on better rather than at a funny angle. Get some PVA glue. This is just from B&Q, I think this was, undiluted, straight. I do use quite a lot here, but I just want to make sure I can get this polystyrene down onto the table fairly secure so I can work on it a bit later on. Take as much as you like, squish it in, squish it about, push it down, get it set to where you want, and then just put some weights in at the end. I think I'll put a couple of books on and the PVA case, and this will hold it down and set it for the next day. And that's about as far as I got for day one.
Back for the start of the second day. All the shapes are cut now. The polystyrene has been glued down. Now we need to get on to sorting out the rest of the ground forms.
This bit was kind of fun. I had the basic shape down. I'm back for the second day. It's all dried in. So now I need to wreck the trenches. I want this to look like it's been destroyed and blown up and bombed. Think of any World War I trench, and they're always like muddy puddles and lots of caved in walls and sides, but they're still there and still standing. As I'm using this for Kill Team, I want some nice undulation for models to hide in as well. And I want it to just look like an overrun, battled last stand. So cutaway, this is completely done by eye. I'm trying to sort of place it so like a bomb has gone and blown both sides of off. I might blow the floor a little bit here. Obviously I've not got much depth to work with in regards to doing that, but I'll have a look and have a play around. I also cut in like an ammo dump or command center at the back up against the wall, just because the trench looked a little bit flat. The next bit is the best bit. This is using the Luke's APS or the Geek Gaming modeling compound. This is a plaster mixed with some sort of fibrous insulation. I don't really know, but whatever it is, it's magic. Add some water, keep mixing until it's kind of like the texture of egg mayonnaise or tuna mayonnaise, something like that. You don't get that long before it dries. You maybe get 5 minutes. Obviously, the wetter you make it, the longer you get. But just cover the polystyrene in this. This is going to cover all those gaps on the side. This polystyrene is, although set, not super sturdy, and this will allow me to paint it, to do all sorts of stuff. I can use spray cans without wrecking it. I want to do the back of the board as well. I've done this previously and I cut 3mm ply up around the back of the board, but it's quite awkward to do. So I just thought, let's use this, make it really strong, and put this in all of the gaps. Cover as much of the board as you like. I'm going to cover ground cover and grout and stuff as well, so I don't actually need to put this on the flat parts of the board, but I do prefer it because it makes it a little more hard wearing. Covering the entire rock sides, I'm not worried about the rock molds at this point. I will do those a little bit later on, but it looks rough, it looks messy, but it's actually helping me push the shape of this. So here's a really sped up bit of me doing the entire board. I get to water it down more as I do the flatter bits, but I want to cover those gaps down the side between the polystyrene as well. I've done boards previously where it looks like it's kind of like grown out of the board, there's a lump in the middle, which isn't great. So water this down loads, and I just covered all the polystyrene here with it as well. Now onto the rock molds. If you want to see how to cast these, I did a video, do click on the link above and that'll show you how to do them. But just use the modeling compound as a glue here. Don't bother with hot glue, stuff like that, because this is made with the same sort of stuff, so it's just as porous. And when you come to paint it, it'll absorb paint the same way the rock molds and the modeling compound do, giving you a nice finish and a good way to stick these on. It's also really solid and it will not come off. So there we are. It's looking messy, it's looking rough, but it's taking shape.
I thought this was a great place to leave it here. I could just let this go now, let it set, let it dry overnight. I really did want to do more, but actually I was a little bit pushed for time. So we come back later for day 3.
It's now time to prepare the wood. I'm going to start using this to base and to edge the walls of the trenches. I'm going to line them all up and I think I'm going to paint them. I'll use my airbrush and some sort of Agrax earth shade, but first I want to texture them. So I'm using any old knife I've got from home. This is a bread knife. I'd rather have had a steel brush or something that will make a finer mark. I'm not sure how visible this will be, but I thought I'd best prepare it now rather than fixing it later. So getting my airbrush, you get the classic thing where something goes wrong. So there we go. It's like just destroying everything, spitting out lovely old expensive Agrax earth shade, but eventually it settles down and I can start to just add a bit more of a darker, varied wooden tone to these in case they show up later. I don't know if the ground cover is going to cover them. I don't know if water's going to make a difference, but I thought I'd best do it and I'll do both sides.
And for day 3, I had done a little bit more work in between. I'd actually sprayed some black spray into those recesses just to see how they would kind of look. And it gives me a bit more of an idea of what I might want to do around them.
When it came to cutting the bits of wood, I wanted to make sure they were kind of a realistic size to a human being. So these are 28mm models. I want to make sure it looks the right sort of length. After a while, I found out I could cut sort of 2 long pieces and 1 short piece from each of them. So I just made a bit of a size jig and then kept cutting roughly to it. I didn't stick exactly to this as it went along because I needed to do loads and I got a bit bored. I ended up with 2 massive piles. The short ones are going to be used as like stakes for the walls and the other ones will be everything else. Now I'm onto the ground cover. I've actually used a bit of a mix here, and this is soil, this is ash from the fire, and grout. And then I've got a bit of tile grout colour as well. I wanted a nice, dark, reddy, muddy ground cover, and the grout is the main thing in this, and this will allow it to set really, really strong when I wet it. Cover everything with PVA. I'm just going to do the floors at this point because I don't know whether to do the floors or the walls. So I did try both, and eventually I figured out the floors was best. Give this a bit of a paint. Try and be relatively accurate because you're going to cover this with the ground cover in a second. And I didn't know if I wanted this to set on the walls yet. I wanted to push the wood into the ground cover, and that way it can kind of fill those gaps between the wood that I'm likely to have. throw this all over it. You can make this relatively thick because it's going to be used as a base anyway, and it's nice to have that. Then I spread it with isopropanol. This will allow the PVA and water spray mix to flow a little bit better because I want to make sure it all gets nice and damp and nice and wet. Cover it with PVA. This is just PVA in a spray can with lots of water. There's not that much PVA to the water because it won't spray very easily otherwise. Cover everything, make sure it's fully saturated and it's soaking. Then get your wood, push it down into it. I tried to do it so it was like one piece of wood and then another one, and then the gap had changed and varied, so it looked a bit more interesting. Some sat flat, some didn't, and this is just kind of how it looked. So I gave this a spray with PVA and watered down as well to make sure this set, and then dropped down some more of the soil into where the exploded bits had happened, hoping to sort of start to get that collapsed wall effect on it without covering this everywhere because the ground is still sticky.
That bit took absolutely ages to do. Laying down all of the wood. I wasn't sure if I should do the wall or the floor first. I did try the walls, but they kind of fell off, so I wasn't really sure. I wanted them to be pushed into the mud. So I laid down the ground form and then pushed all of the wood into those. There's grout in that as well, so it will help it really cling and hold together.
Back for the next day, I needed to do the walls. Now, ideally I'd have done all this in one day, but I didn't have enough time and I had to get back home for work, so I'm now going to paint the walls with PVA. I'm going to be quite accurate here because if not, the whole floor will get sticky. When I put ground cover on this, it will stick to the wood and cover things up. So I'm just sort of chucking this over the bits where I want it to go, which is mainly the walls. So chuck it right into the walls because we're going to push, like we did with the floor, the wood into them. Don't worry too much about getting it on the wood. It's all dry, which is the other advantage to doing it a day later. And you can use the isopropanol to sort of like spray it off because it's really watery, so it won't then stick so well. Again, cover it with isopropanol like I did before, and then spray it with PVA as well. And this will make the wall nice and tacky, and it'll really let that grout activate to make it really, really solid. Then it's time to do this. So I started covering them with PVA before I even stuck them on the walls. Get some PVA, dunk it in, stick it from the floor. I end up doing about 3 or 4 high in different areas, and then put the short stake in between each of them so you can sort of cover that gap. I also set some destroyed bits, which I will break up a little bit later. Then at the same time, on the same day, get the PVA, put this all over everywhere. And actually, as you can see, it's fallen down into some of those cracks, which is great because that's like a natural place where the ground cover would go. So lobby ground cover on, same stuff as before. This is a bit more grouty actually, because I wasn't sure my first bits were. So this is going to set harder, and then just put this all over the entire board. Now it's really starting to take shape and I'm loving the color of this. So cover the whole board in isopropanol, then spray it all with PVA again. This is something we do a lot. And then I found these trees outside. So I did dry them and I thought I might put some like broken trees in just to break up the ground form a little bit more. I used quite a lot of these, stuck some super glue and just jammed them into it whilst it was all still wet. Then I broke up some bits and put them around the floor to look like the trees have been hit with shells and missiles and all sorts of stuff, just to, again, add some nice ground cover.
This is day 4 or 5 of this board build now.
On to the next bit. It's the next day. It's all nice and dry. So I thought I'd try and bring out those cracks and those exploded parts by just spraying them with like a black wash. This is actually Nuln Oil. You can make a wash yourself out of any sort of black paint and water. Then it was the rock molds. I really should have painted these before I put all the ground cover down, but I'm in this position now, so I'm going to just cover them as well. Because they're quite porous, the rock molds, I'm using Nuln Oil again and just spraying all of the rocks, all of the parts where it's like going to collapse. Some of it isn't rock molds, it's just the modeling compound, and it starts to take a bit of a better color. I wanted it quite dark just because the soil's quite light. So the board's looking a lot nicer now. I've got sort of a burnt edge as well on those bits of wood, which I will break off with some clippers. And then it's like another coat of Nuln Oil and now some grey. So I'm starting with some dark greys just from the top, trying to sort of get some nice light sort of zenithal spray. Then I do another coat of a lighter grey again. This is like a slight shade lighter. Then again another one just to make it really grey. But it's still quite grimy because some of the brown has gone in there and the colour of the rocks wasn't completely white before I started. So it's quite nice now and I'm beginning to like the colour. I was a bit worried about how I'd fix this issue. And now it's on to these. These are going to be my tank traps. Fortunately, someone in a YouTube comment reminded me that I need to do tank traps. So these are just the old Forge World sprue bits, I think, from some tanks I've got. And they look like the kind of great size and great shape to be tank traps. So I sprayed them grey at the same time. Then I applied some fallen rocks. This is cement or like broken concrete from the floor. I'm just going to cover the rocks in this so they look all like they've collapsed everywhere and been shot and shelled. And this also slightly changes the color, although when I wet this, it will go darker. But that, to me, is looking exactly how I wanted it to look, which is lucky, I guess. Again, our old friend isopropanol and watered down PVA. Spray these, and as you can see, they're actually changing color because the powder, I think, from the cement or concrete I'd found in the floor is being washed out. So the actual color of them is more like that. And this is now darker, which matches up nicely with the rocks I'd painted a minute ago. So smother these in PVA as well, because you want these to set. Any big rocks that you think might come out, just take them out at this point anyway, or stick some super glue on them. And there we have the rocky surface. As you can see, it's white. This will all clear when the PVA dries.
Deciding where to put the tank traps down kind of came quite naturally. There's spacing along the board to make them look quite even. I didn't imagine whoever built these would just randomly put them anywhere.
You don't need to do these, but I just thought they added a bit more variety to the players, particularly someone who's maybe attacking from that side. I got some super glue, pushed them into the board as far as I can, although it didn't really break the surface because of the grout, and they just laid out looking like that. Then I sprayed some PVA around them because I'm going to use the grout and the soil mix again, just to match these into the board so there's no gaps. This will also help hold them in. I also sprayed the PVA at this point on other places where I felt it needed it, so there might have been a bit I'd missed, or the ground wasn't thick enough, or it was a bit white through, and you can see the modelling compound. So just cover these around. Don't worry about being messy getting it on top, because that's how it would look.
Back for the final day, day 6, just to record putting in the water effects and some grass tufts.
I stuck some grass tufts on off camera to see how they looked, and the more I put on, the more I liked them. Initially I didn't. I quite liked the look, and it gave the board a bit more colour. So that's the rocks dry the next day. I'd say that's looking like a pretty realistic blown up rock side. To do the water, I'm using Clearfix, which I ordered from the Luke's APS or Geek Gaming site, some isopropanol, and a tiny bit of oil paint. I mean the tiniest bit. You put a small blob of this into the isopropanol, then I mixed in the Clearfix. This stuff is like a goopy, solid, sort of resiny type material. I don't actually know what it is, but it's magic. I use this and then mix it. Mix away, mix like you've never mixed before, because it takes absolutely ages for this to turn into a nice, smooth, watery.
Mixing up this just take a bit of a while. Just keep going with it. Keep going with the spatula. You need to make sure it's very fluid, otherwise you end up with cloggy bits and watery bits. But keep mixing longer than you kind of think you should, till you think you've messed up, and then you're probably about right.
It's a bit brown because I wanted sort of a muddy water. It might be a tiny bit redder than I planned on, but we'll see how it goes when it dries. And you can just pour this into any of the holes around the board. So I've got some bigger craters here. I've got sort of like a broken wall rock bit at the back. The floors down at the back, I wanted them to look like they were wet and sort of overrun. So this is the little command bunker bit. And that's the last step to the board build. It will self-level as well, so just put a bit in. You don't need a lot to cover a nice hole. And there we go. That's the board, guarded by some awesome Wargames Atlantic Guard miniatures there. Really, really happy with how this came out. I wasn't sure what I was doing from the start of the project until the end, and somehow this happened. I'm no magic board builder, but I'm pretty happy with how this one turned out. So don't be afraid to give this a go at home.
Well, there you have it. The board is done, finished and complete. There's a lot more room on there for me to do other bits, and I might do a little bit more to it later on down the line. I could glue in some barrels and some boxes into that kind of ammo dump area, but I wanted the board to stay fairly neutral so I could use it for bolt action and other game systems as well. How do I feel about it now? I had no idea how it was going to look at the start. I didn't really have much of a plan, to be honest, other than I knew I wanted a trench board. This is a kill team size board, so it's not very big. There's not a lot I could do with it, but I am really actually happy with how it's turned out. I thought I'd try something totally new, push myself, do new things, do new skills, try new materials, and ultimately, that's all it is. Kind of made it up as I went along. If you guys want to try this kind of board build at home, just get stuck in. The one main thing I would say is be prepared for an absolute ton of mess. I have been covered in grout, I've been covered in soil, pigment, sand, whatever is in this has been all over me at some point, so do be prepared to ruin your clothes and mess up the entire house. If your partner wants a nice clean kitchen table and you want to do it in there, probably don't. Do it outside. If I wasn't filming, I think I'd have done most of this outside. What would I have done differently now? I should, and I knew this when I was doing it really, I should have painted the rocks before I put all the soil on. I mean, it's fine now and you can't really tell because I've covered it enough. bits and bobs, but it was a little bit more awkward trying to glue around them. I wouldn't have used the airbrush necessarily. I've probably done the leopard spotting, which is where you take a couple of colors like a black, a red, and a beigey type color, really water them down and just cover, say, a third to half with each of those washes, and it'll give you a nice gray effect with a bit of a dry brush over the top. Done. But it wasn't too much of an issue to overcome. I was really happy with the result anyway of those rocks. It looks nice and collapsed and fallen in, it's perfect. For playability, it's not the best kill team board because it's quite open, so if you've got a combat army versus a shooting army, the shooting have no cover from the combat, and the combat have no cover from the shooting. You could drop some containers down, you could put a broken rhino in there. I was tempted to do that, but by this point I kind of wanted to get it done and I didn't want to stick it to just that one game system. Maybe you could do the trenches a bit deeper. I mean, I'm actually happy I did weigh these up. By the time I'd come into wrecking it, there were probably another like 2 centimeters shorter than I had originally planned for once you put in the ground form and the wood on the floor and wreck the sides. So they're tall enough that they're about half to 3/4 the size of a 28mm model. So good enough to play in, looks awesome on the board, and I cannot wait to film a battle report on this board. What do you guys think? Have you enjoyed this board building process? Do you want to see more videos like it? Let me know what types of boards you want to see. I've got loads more kill team boards to have to build yet anyway. I've got about another 4 or 5 of these frames, so I might film a few more and show you guys some different ones. This is a brown one, I might do a sandy one, I might do a city one, I've got a Mars one, but I might do one anyway. So whatever you want to see, let me know in the comments below. If you've enjoyed this video, please do remember to like, share, subscribe, and hit the alarm bell for more videos to come. Check out my Patreon below. There's a great little Discord going on now, and lots of tips and advice for people. Myself, I'm in there. Luke from Geek Gaming Scenics is in there. So if you've got any questions about how to use these materials, do check down below in the link in the description for that. I really appreciate the support, and thank you to all my patrons as well. Check out the links to Amazon Associates, the Geek Gaming stuff. There's a few links there for all the materials used. If you've got any questions, put them below in the comments, and I will do my best to answer them for you. Other than that, there's not much more to say, so thanks so much guys for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it, and I will catch you in another video. Stay safe and take care.